Freedom of speech for the individual is confined to the mental type, who enjoys indefinitely a fruitless exercise of his lungs at a street corner without the slightest prospect of his words ever being translated into action. In fact, freedom of speech under financial democracy is merely another solemn make-believe which obscures the reality of tyranny. No individual has any hope of producing any practical effect by words unless he serves one of the great party machines, and, as we shall observe in the next chapter, the party machines in turn serve the great interests, and by the very nature of the system which they support, are inevitably the servants of finance. So in actual practice, under this system, freedom of speech is the freedom to be the servant of the financier. As for freedom of speech, in what today does it consist? It is true that anyone can carry a soapbox to a street corner, and from that eminence may make any moderate noise that he sees fit to emit, unless the whim of a local police chief transports him on charge of obstruction before a bench of magistrates selected for other political qualifications than street corner oratory. But may we not assume as the premise of the argument that none but a purely mental type desires to talk under these conditions purely for the sake of talking without any effective action following from his words? Judged by that criterion of reality, freedom of speech does not exist, for the persuasion of our countrymen is meaningless unless we can persuade them to do something. That power does not exist without a party machine to mobilize their votes, and party machines are not the possessions of individuals, but of the great interests. To this the retort may be made that any individual is free to win the support of his fellow countrymen, and in so doing, from their enthusiasm, to create his own machine in the face of the money power. To that argument, in turn, we make the proud reply that this phenomenon has been achieved but once in post-war Britain, in the creation of British Union, and, the writer may add a note, from that unique experience at the end of some years of such a struggle, if anyone believes that it is an easy and everyday task to create a new movement from nothing by the force of the spirit alone in face of money power, press power, and party power, he is welcomed to the unparalleled exertion of that experience, but he will win success only at the cost of something in his own life, and being that is not an everyday occasion. In the face of the present negation of freedom in the realm of press and speech, British Union approaches a constructive solution in the determination to win real freedom of press and speech for the people. That freedom will rest on two main principles. 1. That freedom of press means the freedom of the people to read the truth in the national press, and not the freedom of finance power to tell lies to the people in support of vested interests. 2. That freedom of speech for the individual means an effective method of translating his opinion into action if by words he can persuade sufficient of his fellows to agree with him. In the sphere of the press, therefore, we lay down the truly revolutionary principle that the press shall tell the truth. To this end, the proprietors of great newspapers will be liable to prosecution if it can be proved in court that they have published news which is not true, and the penalty will be particularly severe if it can be shown that such publication was deliberately and maliciously conceived in support of a private interest to the detriment of the national interest. It is a curious anomaly of present confusion that an individual who is labelled can obtain redress from the law, but the nation, when labelled, can obtain no redress. Therefore, it will be open to a government elected by the people on behalf of the nation to sue a newspaper proprietor if his paper publishes facts which are false to the detriment of the nation's interests, particularly if the object is to promote a private interest at the nation's expense. This will curtail the freedom of the press to publish news which is untrue, but it will confer upon the people the freedom to read news which is true. British Union takes the simple view that the freedom of the people to learn the truth should supersede the freedom of the vested interest to deceive the people. For this reason, our new freedom of the press rests on the simple but revolutionary principle that the press shall tell the truth. Consequently, neither national nor local paper which tells the truth will in any way be affected, and no proprietor can have any complaint unless he makes the unexpected admission that he is in the habit of not telling the truth in his papers at present. Some organs of the national press, no doubt, will pass unscathed through this test, and certainly the great majority of our local papers. For local papers, on the whole, are straightforward purveyors of news, serving their localities as honest journalists who give a fair representation to all opinions, with a responsible regard to national interests. If the whole national press was conducted in the same method and in the same spirit as the majority of the local press, they would have nothing to fear from British Union government. The machinery for putting into practice the principle of freedom of speech is equally definite. We start from the premise that if freedom of speech is to be a reality, the individual must possess effective means of translating words into actions. To this end, any individual with industry, interest, or profession will be invited to enter into the appropriate corporation, the detailed structure of which is suggested in Mr. Raven Thompson's able book on the subject, and will not here be repeated beyond a survey of economic function in Chapter 4. Within the corporation, everyone is not only permitted, but by every means encouraged to express opinions, both constructive and critical, and is provided with a means of making opinion effective. For if the individual can move the relevant corporation by argument that corporation's opinion, representing a very substantial factor in the state, is transmitted to government, and for government to ignore corporate opinion would be to court dismissal at the next vote on universal franchise by the sum of individual voters who comprise the corporations. The mechanism of the corporation, ready to the hand of the individual, is a more powerful instrument for the expression of free speech in effective terms of reality than the lonely and meaningless pedestal of the street corner orator. Through corporate life, the individual wins meaning and reality for freedom of speech. Such real and effective freedom of speech is a basic necessity for British Union government, which in the achievement of a revolution in national life must ever carry the people with it, and maintain a far closer contact with the people's opinion than government possesses today. It is good enough for the governments of financial democracy to consult the people in a mock election once in 5 years, in the hope that they will go to sleep in the interval, so that the government can go to sleep as well. That is a procedure possible for governments which in reality only exist to preserve the existing system, and to guard its vested interests. But such a conception is not good enough for a revolutionary movement determined to wrest from chaos a nobler civilization. For such an achievement, it is not enough to obtain the tacit consent of the people. It is necessary to carry the people with us all the way, and all the time, on the march to higher things. That is why we must know all the time what they are feeling and thinking, and have precise means to that end. That is why we must devise machinery not only to give the people freedom of speech, but to make that freedom effective. Contact between government and people must ever be so close that the flame of our own revolutionary passion may pass continually from the souls of pioneers to fire and maintain the spirit of the people at a white heat of ardour unknown to the doped and tepid supporters of financial democracy. For this shall be a great comradeship between the people and the government they have elected to lead them. They must ever know what we are doing, and we must ever know what they are thinking. That is why we believe in the people's real freedom of speech, and will win it for them. Thus only can be secured that close and sacred union between the people and their government by which alone a great nation shall march again to greatness.